Hey guys, tonight we're going to step into something stickier. Not the kind of history you read in school. This is the kind they tried to forget. If you're new here, welcome. And if you enjoy these slow, strange stories, feel free to like the video or drop a comment telling me where you're listening from. Now dim the lights. Let the day melt away. We're going down beneath the cobbled streets, into the filth of medieval England. It's the year 1346. The bell tower of Canterbury tolls once, maybe twice, echoing through the damp air. A fog lies low over the stone roads. The baker's fire has long gone cold, and the monks of St. Augustine's are already deep in prayer. But below the city, just beyond where the lamplight reaches, a man named Walter is beginning his shift. He does not wear armor. He does not read Latin. He does not pray aloud before work. Walter is a gong farmer, a night soil man, a muck shoveler, and tonight, like every other night, he is going to climb into a cesspit with nothing but a rope, a bucket, and a prayer he keeps to himself. The word gong comes from the old word for going, as in, go in to relieve yourself. In other words, he is the man who removes what everyone else leaves behind. His boots slosh into the shallow trench behind the baker's home. It smells like rot and horsehair and vinegar. But Walter doesn't wrinkle his nose anymore. The air is heavy, almost sweet with decay. The kind of stink that clings to your hair, your teeth, your soul. He hauls off the heavy wooden lid covering the latrine pit. Inside, weeks of waste from the household above, fermenting under the floorboards like some unspeakable stew. By law, pits must be emptied every so often, or risk poisoning the groundwater. But no one checks. They just send for Walter when the smell becomes unbearable, and even then, only at night. No one wants to see a gone farmer. They want to believe the filth just disappears. Walter lowers the bucket. Rope cuts into his palms. He knows how to work without splashing. Knows when the pit is almost full just by how the rope tugs. Knows how to step light in boots that are always wet, always caked in things no one dares name. And he works in silence. Only the squeak of the pulley, the slop of waste into the barrel, the distant hoot of an owl from the cathedral roof. A gong farmer can make decent money, more than some carpenters, even more than scribes. But he cannot sit at a public table, cannot join the parish council. Children cross the street to avoid him. And yet, if he disappeared tomorrow, the city would drown in its own filth within days. By the time Walter has filled the first barrel, his shoulders burn. The rope is slick. His fingers are blistered. But he is used to it. He has been doing this since his uncle brought him on at 12 years old. The pit is only one of 3 tonight. The next one lies farther down, beneath the cobbled lane, where the butcher and his family live. They eat well. Their waste smells worse. More animal than man. Walter ties the barrel shut with a cloth soaked in vinegar, his only defense against the stench, as he drags it to the cart. The cart creaks like it's mourning something. Its wheels are crusted with the dried leavings of past nights. No matter. The job is steady. Paid by the load. He walks alone. Past shuttered stalls where fruit once lay ripe and sweet. Past taverns that reek of old ale and burnt bread. No one watches. No one waves. The truth is, Walter walks beneath their notice, like a shadow that carries their shame. His next stop is under an older building, one with Roman foundations. The walls sweat with old moisture. There's no ladder here, just a narrow slope cut into the earth, slick with slime and moss. He lights a stub of tallow candle and grips it in his teeth. His boots splash into something deep, warm and foul. He doesn't flinch, just works, The chamber is barely 5 feet tall. The walls are smeared with mold, streaked brown and black. The ceiling drips slowly drip, drip onto the back of his neck. There's something floating in the far corner. A dead rat, or worse. He doesn't look. Instead, he plunges the bucket again. One scoop at a time, one lift, one drag. One breath through clenched teeth. Above him, he can hear the shifting of someone in bed. A woman coughing in the night. The creak of a chamber pot being used, emptied down into the very pit where he now works. The waste of one becomes the labor of another. That's how it's always been. Sometimes, when he's down here, Walter thinks about saints, about the catacombs under Rome, about the bones of men stacked like kindling, waiting for someone to remember them. And then he thinks about the living, how they sleep warmly, cleanly, because of men like him. Men no one thanks. Men who work while others dream. He wipes a smear of something from his cheek with the back of his sleeve. The candle's almost gone. The barrel is nearly full. One more pit to go. Outside, the rain begins again. Not a soft drizzle, but a true English downpour, thick and steady, like someone raining out the sky. Walter pulls his hood tighter, though it does little good. His cloak is already soaked. His boots, too. The filth on them softens and turns slick. He pushes the cart through the narrow lane behind the bishop's house. The wheels stick in the mud. It takes all his weight to move them. This last pit belongs to a tavern, the kind where travelers from Dover stop for a night, drink too much, and leave without remembering the name. Its privy is behind the stable, shielded by a half-rotted fence and a patch of nettles. Walter has been here before. The waste is always fresh, always full, always worse after feast days. He lifts the lid, and there, atop the dark pool, sit two rats, fat, slick, and half-blind. One of them blinks at him. The other vanishes with a plop. He's learned not to care. The rats are part of it. Like the smell, like the rain. His job isn't to think. His job is to clear what others pretend isn't there. It takes him nearly an hour to empty the tavern pit. His hands cramp. His stomach turns once when the wind shifts and blows the full stink up into his face. But he keeps going. In the distance, a cock crows. Morning is near. He wipes his hands with straw and rinses them in a rain barrel. The water is cold. His knuckles are cracked and red. No one thanks him. No one pays extra. But they all keep calling. Once, years ago, he tried to sit at a table in the alehouse. He had coins. He had bathed. But the woman behind the counter sniffed once, narrowed her eyes, and said simply, "We don't serve your kind inside, your kind." As if the muck clings deeper than skin, as if it gets into the soul. He never tried again. Now, when he passes in daylight, people step aside. Mothers whisper to children. Young men cover their noses and snicker. They don't say his name. They say, "There goes the gong man." And still, he earns more than some tailors, more than the bell ringer. He pays for his own roof, his own bread. His tools are simple, but they are his. The priest may refuse him communion. The noble may ride past without a glance. But Walter knows the truth. When their world begins to rot, he is the one who carries it away. The sky is pale now, a soft pink behind the chimneys. Smoke rises from a few hearths, the baker, the brewers, a laundress or two. Walter pushes his cart to the edge of the city walls, where the bishop's ditch runs thick with runoff. The land here sinks a little, soggy with centuries of waste and rainfall. There's a gate, rusted, kept locked to the public, but he has the key. Behind it is a field the city pretends doesn't exist, a place for the waste to be dumped and raked into the earth. Later, farmers will come to collect what they call night soil. They'll shovel it into sacks, spread it over their crops. Cabbages, leeks, even barley for ale, grown from the filth of 1,000 privies. He tips the first barrel. The muck slides out with a heavy sound, like wet rope uncoiling. The second, then the third. Flies rise in a cloud. He doesn't swat at them. He's learned. If you stay still, they leave you be faster. When he's done, he drags the cart into a shed near the gate, rinses it with rainwater, packs away the rope and the bucket. He lays the cloth that covered the barrels in a tub of lye. Tomorrow, he'll scrub it clean as it ever gets. Walter sits for a moment on the edge of the stone trough, hands dangling, boots soaking in the mud. He listens to the city waking up. Chickens fuss, hammers ring, children cry. Church bells begin to toll the hour, and no one knows what he's done tonight. No one sees how close they came to illness, to flooding, to rot in the very beams of their homes. But Walter knows. He knows that behind every candlelit sermon and polished chalice, behind every meal and merchant's corn, lies a quiet, disgusting truth. This city stands because someone is willing to carry away what no one else will touch. He gathers his things, walks home through the back lanes. His small cottage sits near the tannery, far from the cathedral. He washes his face with lavender water, eats a hill of bread, wraps himself in an old wool blanket. He will sleep until the sun is high, and when night comes again, so will the privies, so will the smell, so will the work, and so, without thanks, without honour, Canterbury stays clean. The year is 1293, and the city of Bruges hums with trade. Merchants from the Hanseatic League line the canals. Barges groan under the weight of wool, wax and wine. Bells ring from the belfry, echoing across the wet red roofs. And in the narrow lanes just past the market square, behind a low brick arch, lies the tannery. It is the worst-smelling place in all of Flanders, and young Mathage has just been apprenticed to it. He's 12, barely tall enough to carry a full skin on his back. But his father is a cooper with debts. The tannery pays. That's all that matters. They give him a tunic stiff with old grease, a wooden scraper, and a place to sleep in the loft, above the vats. His bed smells of blood and urine and wet leather. Always wet, always heavy. The air tastes like iron and bile. By morning, Mathage is already barefoot in the piss pit, the shallow trench behind the hide-yard. His first job is to stir it, a mixture of cow urine, stale ale, and human water. Men relieve themselves into the trench to keep it full. Women sometimes leave jugs at the door, yellow with warmth. Every apprentice begins here, because this is how you soften the hair on the skins. He stirs with a long oar, splashing, mixing, sometimes slipping in up to his knees. No one helps. No one explains. They just say, the faster you stir, the quicker you move on. But the smell doesn't leave. It climbs into your throat, makes your eyes sting, curls your hair with damp. He watches rats skitter along the beams, fat with meat scraps and skin trimmings. The foreman, Peter, walks past now and then, a broad man with blackened fingernails and no patience. He nods once. That's all the approval you get. Mathage begins to hum to himself. a lullaby his mother used to sing when she washed his feet. Now, his feet are the thing no one will touch. At midday, he's given bread and boiled onions. He eats beside the salting shed, watching a worker hammer dry cowhide with a mallet. The thudding is steady, like a heartbeat. Everywhere, tools made to beat, scrape, and stretch. Everything is wet. Nothing is clean. But Bruges runs on leather, boots, belts, armor straps, wine flasks. The nobles walk on it. The priests bind books with it. And none of it is possible without this place. Without this boy. In the trench. Stirring the stink of the city into something useful. By the end of his second week, Mathage no longer gags when he stirs the trench. He dreams of the smell now, wakes with it in his nose. Even when he leaves the tannery to fetch water or run messages, people wrinkle their faces before he opens his mouth. One boy on the street calls him Stinkskind, skin of the stink. Another just spits near his feet. Mathage says nothing, because today he's been allowed to step up. No more trench duty. No more piss pit. Today he begins work at the scraping stones. In the open yard behind the tannery lie curved slabs of granite, each fitted at just the right height. They shimmer faintly in the sun, their grooves dark with old fat and hair. Fresh hides come in from the slaughterhouse, folded and steaming. Some still have hoof or horn fragments clinging to them. They smell like wet death. It is Mathage's job to stretch one across the stone, tighten it with woodland pegs, and then using a blunt iron blade shave off the flesh. The skin resists at first. It slips, tugs back. But with the right grip, it peels away like bark from a soaked log. The blade slides, and chunks of meat roll off into the gutter below. The work is rhythmic. Press, scrape, peel. Flick the scraps aside. Start again. Beside him, older boys sing while they work. Not songs of joy, but songs to keep pace. Deep-throated tunes about the saints who keep your hands from slipping, and the devils who live in the lime vats. He watches them out of the corner of his eye. Tries to copy their rhythm. Tries not to fall behind. The skin he's working on comes from a winter cow, thicker, tougher. It fights him. By midday, his arms burn. The skin splits once, and a burst of foul liquid sprays his tunic. He flinches, but keeps going, because the foreman is watching. Because if you show weakness, you go back to the trench. He learns how to find the grain of the hide, how to scrape clean without tearing, how to listen for the soft suck of flesh separating from leather. He's allowed 1 cup of watered ale at dusk. He drinks it sitting on a pile of discarded hooves, watching the light fade across the canals. The belfry bell rings. A market boat passes by, loaded with barrels. Inside those barrels may be scrolls, spices, even silk. But here, in the shadows, beneath the city's riches, boys like Mathage scrape the world into shape. And no one thanks them. It doesn't matter how often Mathage washes. Not with isoap, not with river water, not with the crushed lavender his sister sneaks him from time to time. The smell stays. It sinks into his skin, his hair, his breath. Old tanners say it enters your blood, that after a few years, even your tears smell of rot. One evening, he visits the apothecary to deliver a sack of leather strips for wrapping ointment jars. The old woman takes one sniff and says nothing, just nods and motions for him to leave it by the door. The next apprentice task is worse. In the backyard, huge barrels bubble with quicklime, pale, cloudy liquid used to loosen the hairs from fresh hides. It stings the eyes, burns the skin, eats through the soles of your boots if you stand still too long. Mathija's job is to fish the hides out, lay them on a sloped table, and scrape away every last hair. Some come loose easily, others cling like moss. When he finishes, his fingers are raw. Blisters on his palms pop and fill with lime water. The foreman offers no sympathy, just hands him boiled pig fat to rub into the sauce. It smells better than nothing, but not by much. The older boys laugh and say, "Now you're truly one of us." He wonders if that's a blessing or a curse. One night, after a long shift, he walks past the candlemaker's shop. A girl he once knew is sweeping the doorway. She looks up, then down, then inside. Not a word. He keeps walking, because the tannery doesn't just change your scent. It changes how people see you. Even your own family sits a little farther down the bench. Your bread is passed, not placed. No one hugs you in winter. Not anymore. But the master tanner, old Willem, lives in the largest house on the lane. His gloves are fine, his belt stitched with golden thread, and the aldermen treat him with respect, even if they breathe shallow when he's near. He made his wealth from waste, from blood and bone and bark. And so, quietly, Mathiج begins to dream, not of leaving the tannery, but of one day owning it, of having his own ledger, his own apprentice, of being the man who smells terrible, yes, but whom the city must respect. For in Bruges, you may be marked by stink, but if you stay long enough, you learn to wear it like a crown of grease and steam. The finished hides are stacked in cool, dry cellars layered between boards, pressed flat by stone weights. They smell different now, still strong, but richer, less rot, more earth. That is how you know it has worked. The stink of death has become the scent of use. Mathiج watches as the master cuts a hide into strips for harnesses. The knife glides clean. No tearing, no flinching. Nearby, the coil rubs oil and black ash into another sheet to make it soft and flexible. He wears gloves made of the very leather he prepares. It's like watching a man shape his own skin. In the far corner, a boy threads laces through a fresh pair of boots. They are thick, beautiful, nearly indestructible, fit for a merchant or a soldier of rank. They'll sell for good silver, and if cared for properly, they might last 100 years. Mathiج asks if they'll ever see who buys them. Peter just shrugs. Does it matter? Their feet will know us, and in that moment, Mathiج understands something, that the world walks on the backs of men like him. Every saddle, every scroll binding, every pouch on a knight's hip, it all begins with a boy in a trench, with scraped flesh and scalded hands, with skins dragged from blood to lime to pistol. With patience, the boots leave the tannery the next morning, wrapped in wax cloth and loaded onto a wagon headed for Ghent. Mathiج watches them go, then turns back to his tasks. He rubs his arms where the lime stung yesterday. The burn has become a scab. The scab soon a scar. But even scars have stories. And this one is owned. When the bell rings at sundown, he walks the long way home, past the shoemaker's stall, where finished goods line the shelves. He sees a pair that looks familiar. Black hide, triple stitched. He knows the curve of the toe. He scraped that hide himself. He smiles, because even if no one else knows it, his hands live inside the leather dot quietly, permanently, like fingerprints in the grain. He will return to the tannery tomorrow, And the next day. And maybe, one day, he'll run it himself. The stink will never leave him, but neither will the strength. The year is 1349. London is sick. It seeps from the docks at Billingsgate, where will ships once unloaded. It curls through East Cheap, through Cheapside, into the market stalls and churchyards. And no bell rings faster now than the one tied to the plague collector's cart. His name is Edric, though most just call him the bellman, because at dawn and dusk, through the choking fog, you hear him before you see him, clang, 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 a slow, steady chime. One meant to warn, one meant to beg, bring out your dead. He wears a waxed cloak, thick gloves, and a cloth soaked in vinegar wrapped across his mouth. Some say he carries a sprig of rosemary behind his ear. Others say that's just for show. No one asks too closely. His cart is wooden, iron wheels. Its bed is lined with straw, fresh each morning, soaked by nightfall. A rope dangles from the front, looped through the handle of a small brass hand bell. He rings it as he walks. Each house he passes has its shutters closed tight. If the door opens, it opens slowly. And sometimes they don't speak at all. They just point. A mother, a child. A grandfather slumped in the corner chair, unmoving since the night before. They do not look ill. They look faded, as if something has reached inside and pulled out the warmth. Edric doesn't linger. He lifts them gently, wraps them in old linens if there are any left. If not, he takes them as they are. One by one, he lays them in the cart. Sometimes to a bundle, sometimes a whole family. And always, before he walks away, he says the same thing under his breath. Go easy. Not a prayer, not a rite, just a wish. He did not begin this work by choice. But when the old collector caught the sickness and coughed himself into the grave, someone had to step in. And Edric, he was already used to silence, used to being alone. Now, he walks each street like a man between worlds, not quite alive, not yet dead. Trusted by no one, feared by all, but needed desperately. The cart grows heavier as the day drags on. The wheels groan against the cobbles, catchy now and then in the deep ruts near Cornhill. But Edric doesn't slow. He can't. Behind him, flies follow in clouds. Ahead, the streets part like water round a drifting corpse. People pulling children indoors, shopkeepers slamming shutters. Even the dogs won't come near. He arrives at a modest house near St. Marylebone, where a single sprig of yew is tied to the door handle, a silent sign that death has passed through. Edric knocks once. A pale woman opens the door, eyes rimmed red, hands trembling. Inside, a man lies on the floorboards, face turned to the wall. A black stain runs down his neck. His lips are cracked. His hands are blue. The woman does not cry. She has no tears left. She just whispers, "He was coughing since Tuesday." I thought it was just the smoke." Edric nods once. No judgment. No reply. Only the work. He wraps the man in an old cloak and lifts him gently. He does not look long at the face. He's learned it's easier not to. The woman presses a coin into his palm. A farthing, still warm. He leaves it on the stoop. Payment is never expected. He rings the bell once more. The clang echoes through the lane. Bring out your dead. Further down, a group of monks pass by, swinging censers filled with incense and herbs. The smoke trails through the street like holy mist. One nods at Edric. A silent greeting between men who walk with death. The cart is nearly full now. Limbs overlapping. Fingers curled. Faces turned skyward. He ties a cloth over the load, partly from modesty, partly to keep the flies down. The cloth is damp. Smells of lye and vinegar. It barely helps. Each time the wheels strike a stone, the bodies shift. But Edric keeps walking. Because he knows the sooner they're buried, the less chance of another infection. He reaches the edge of the city by late afternoon. The burial pit lies beyond the gate, where a field has been cleared and consecrated. Its edges are steep, dug by prisoners and monks. At the bottom, a dozen other carts worth, already covered in lime. He unties the cloth. One by one, with quiet strength, he lifts the bodies out and lowers them down. No prayers, no names. Just the final ritual of the forgotten. He wipes his hands with straw, stares into the pit, and for a brief moment, he wonders if he'll be at the bottom tomorrow. But then he turns back toward the city, because the bell must ring again, and the dead won't wait. The pit is quiet once he's gone. Back in London, the streets are changing. Some are nearly deserted. Others bustle with panic, people fleeing, priests shouting sermons, merchants haggling for burial linen. But through it all, Edric returns. He walks past the goldsmith's row, past the butchers, who've begun to sprinkle ash across their stalls, past the apothecary, who now sells bundles of dried sage and vinegar cloth for triple their worth. And when someone dies, they leave a coin near the door, sometimes tucked under a rock, sometimes tied in a rag, sometimes clasped between the stiff fingers of the dead themselves. These are the coins for the dead. Not payment, exactly. More like a toll, a quiet superstition, half-remembered. You mustn't go into the next world empty-handed. Edric doesn't take the coins. He leaves them where they are. He knows better than to rob the dead, even if they're beyond knowing. But he marks each one in his head. A farthing by the carpenter's stoop. A silver penny in the windowsill near Pudding Lane. A gold angel tucked inside the hand of a merchant who died sitting upright at his desk. He nods to each. A silent accounting. One evening, near dusk, he finds a child, maybe 6 years old, laid out on a bench near the fishmonger's guild, wrapped in a red cloth, hands folded neat. No one in sight. Beside her, a crust of bread, and a small brass button. No coin. He lifts her carefully, places her at the top of the cart, away from the rest. And when he reaches the pit that night, he places a copper token from his own coat pocket beside her. No one sees. No one needs to. Some things aren't about tradition. They're about keeping your soul straight. When he returns home, his single room near Cripplegate, he washes with lye, burns his tunic over a slow fire, drinks ale that tastes faintly of metal, and sits in silence, staring at the candle flame. His neighbors keep their distance. They never knock, never ask how he is, but every now and then, one leaves a bit of bread outside his door, or a cup of broth. They won't speak to him, but they know, if death comes, he will come next, quietly, respectfully, with his cart and his bell. There's a saying among the grave diggers, if you survive the Black Year, you'll never fear death again. But Edric doesn't believe that, because he's seen too much, smelled too much. Death doesn't just come with bells and pits and lime. It comes quiet, in the color of a man's lips, in the sound of a cough behind a door, in the way a bird no longer lands on a windowsill. He knows these signs now. They haunt him. In his dreams, he walks a street lined with corpses, but none have faces. He wakes up gasping, the reek of decay still in his nose, even if he bathed the night before. There is no washing it out of your memory. Men like Edric, the plague collectors, the death counters, the trenchmen, they all share a look. Not fear, not sorrow, but a dull knowing, a heaviness in the eyes, because after a while, you recognize the patterns. You know which houses are next, which alleyways have grown to quiet, which families have left offerings outside long before they call for help. And perhaps worse than the dead are the ones left behind. The fathers who carry out their own sons. The sisters who beg Edric to wait. Just wait one more hour, even as the fevered one inside gasps their final breaths. Sometimes they beg him to take them too, to put them on the cart. He never does, but he listens. And that may be the crueler mercy. One morning, just past St. Paul's, a priest stops him. Not with a prayer, not with a question, but with a warning. You see too much. You hear too much. You walk the line between this world and the next. Be careful you don't slip. Edric says nothing. Just nods. Then rings the bell once. Clang, clang, it echoes against the stone. Years from now, the sickness will pass. The carts will vanish. Streets will fill again with laughter and bread and bells that celebrate rather than mourn. But Edric will still walk quietly. Even if he no longer carries the dead, he'll carry something else. The weight of all he saw, of all he remembers. Because someone must. Someone must remember the year London's breath turned shallow. When coins were placed in cold hands. When silence meant more than prayer. And when the only man you could count on was the one who came with a cart and left without a name. York, 1372. The old Roman walls still stand, mossy and cracked, circling the city like the rim of a forgotten cup. Inside, markets buzz, abbeys chant, and nobles ride past on horses wrapped in silk. But above it all, at the top of a slope where the wind never sleeps, stands a crooked house of stone. This is where Anwen lives, daughter of the executioner. The house is not large, not beautiful, but it is solid, paid for, isolated. A place no one visits unless they must. Her father's name is Hagen. His axe hangs over the hearth, not decorative, but sharpened each week with care. He cleans it with vinegar, oils the handle, wraps it in cloth, not because he is proud, but because he knows it must never fail. Anwen is 16 now. She keeps the ledger, prepares the linens, fetches her father's food after each event. She has never seen a beheading in full, but she's heard them. The hush before the blade, the gasp. The sound that's not quite a thud, not quite a wet slap, but something in between. When she was younger, she asked her father why he took the job. He said, because someone must. And it's better that it be someone who does it cleanly. And he does. He's known for it. 3 strokes is sloppy. 2 is poor. 1 clean cut. That's mercy. But mercy doesn't earn you friends. Children won't play with Anwen. Priests speak to her with guarded tones. Even the baker down the hill gives her old loaves, never fresh, never warm. In York, Being an executioner's child means living in a quiet kind of exile. Still, her father is not cruel. He does not drink too much. He does not raise his voice. He tends roses in the yard, reads psalms in the evenings, and sometimes, when the sun sets and no one's watching, he hums old songs, slow, wordless things that tremble in the candlelight. Anwen listens from the stairs and on the wooden rail. She thinks his voice sounds like sorrow with a backbone. Sometimes she wonders what it would be like to live in the Minster Quarter, to walk without whispers, to belong. But this house, high above the city, is her world. And down in the cellar, beneath the sacks of barley and salt pork, lies a box wrapped in oilcloth. Inside, linen cords, a black hood, and a small book of names. Some crossed out, some still waiting. The trade is not spoken of in public, not even in whispers. And yet, everyone knows. 3 times a year, when the sentence is handed down by the city magistrate, a letter arrives at their door. No seal, just a folded parchment, damp with the smell of candle wax and sweat. Anwen knows better than to read it. She places it on the table. Her father reads in silence, then folds it once and sets it beneath the axe. No discussion, no delay. That night, he sharpens the blade. The same strokes each time, 12 passes per side, slow and steady. Anwen boils water, lays out cloths, prepares the post for oiling. On execution day, they rise before the church bells. He dresses plainly, dark tunic, leather boots, gloves, no ornament, no display. Anwen carries the small bundle behind him as they descend the hill. People see them coming and pretend not to. Some cross the road. Others glance at their shoes. By the time they reach the scaffold, usually set up near the castle gate, the crowd has already gathered. Vendors whisper prayers under their breath. Children peek from behind sleeves. The city waits for a blood with a strange stillness. Anwen stands to the side. She does not meet eyes. Her hands rest on the ropes and cloths. Sometimes she feels them tremble, even when the wind is still. When her father steps up, a hush falls. He nods to the guards, takes the prisoner's name from the herald, checks the cords, measures the height of the block. Once, a young man kicked and cursed and spit, and Hagen paused, walked away, and returned only when the man had gone quiet. A clean death requires stillness, he said later. Even the worst of men deserves that. Some cheer, some cry, some make the sign of the cross. But when it is done, when the blade falls and the head rolls, everyone looks away. Except Anwen. She always watches the moment after. When her father closes his eyes. When his hand trembles ever so slightly as he wipes the axe clean. When the crowd scatters like birds disturbed too late. They walk home in silence. Past the same people who will never knock at their door. Past windows that shudder faster than storm winds. The bloody cloths go into a pot. The axe is scrubbed with salt and oil. The name is crossed from the ledger. And in the garden, her father hums again. A low tune, a sad one. Anwen wonders how long a man can carry so many names. So many final moments. So many secrets. There are things you get used to. The smell of blood. The weight of stairs. The way people pause when you enter a room. Then pretend they weren't looking. But some things never soften. Not with time. Not with age. Anwen learns this on a cold spring morning, when the letter comes marked with a dark streak, as if it had been carried in haste or dropped in something wet. She doesn't touch it, just sets it on the table. Her father reads it twice, then sighs, not heavily, not dramatically, just tired. The name on the page is Thomas Wynne, a baker's son, a boy Anwen knew when they were younger. They once fed crumbs to birds together on the wall walk. He used to offer candied chestnuts from the market stalls when the grown-ups weren't looking. He was caught with a stolen coin and a wounded man. The charges were clear, the sentence swift. "It's not up to me," her father says, laying down the paper. "Only that it be done right. On the day of the execution, the crowd is larger than usual. Not angry, but hushed, curious, sad. Some seem to be holding their breath. Anwen helps as always." But when the cloth is unwrapped and the prisoner led forward, she sees his eyes. Still the same grey-blue, still sharp. He doesn't cry, doesn't beg, just looks at her, and in that moment, everything she thought she had learned, all the coolness, all the numbness, fractures. She wants to step forward, to say his name, to do something, anything. But she doesn't. Because this is the trade. This is what it means to be the executioner's daughter. Her father gives Thomas a moment, speaks to him softly, not for anyone else to hear. Then it's over. A hush, a thud, a scattering. She helps gather the cloths, but her hands shake. She can't meet her father's eyes, and when they walk home, her steps feel heavier than ever before. That night, she asks him, "Do you remember all of them?" He stares into the fire. "Every one," he says. "Even when I wish I didn't," she nods. And for the first time, she understands something unspoken, that what you carry in this work is not just blood. It's memory, it's silence, it's the weight of seeing what others refuse to look at. And once you've seen it, you can never unsee it. Summer comes early that year. The streets of York fill with music, market noise, and drifting petals from the blooming trees near the minster. But up on the hill, in the crooked house by the wall, the air stays still. Anwen doesn't go into town much anymore. When she does, she moves quickly, to the tanner's, to the miller, then home. People nod, sometimes, but only with their eyes. Children cross themselves when they see her. One woman offers a kind word, but it ends in an awkward silence. They all know what she is, or rather, what she comes from. At the feast of St. John, the whole city gathers near the river for games and bread and stories. Anwen walks the edge of the crowd. She watches the jugglers, the ribbon dancers, the pipers. But no one invites her to join. She sees a group of girls her age skipping stones. One glances her way, recognition flickers, but she turns back to the water as if the moment hadn't happened. It isn't hatred. It's something gentler and stranger, fear wrapped in politeness. Not long after, a messenger brings another letter. This one sealed in red wax. Her father reads it, folds it, says nothing for a long while. Then finally, they've asked me to train a new man. A younger one, from Norwich, and Wynne looks up. "You're stepping down," he nods. "A time comes. Even for men like me, she isn't sure whether to feel relief or fear. What will their lives be without the work that set them apart? What will fill the silence? In the months that follow, the scaffold is used less and less. The city begins to forget. But Anwin doesn't. She still hears the wind whistle past the old post, still folds linens with precision, still watches her father light the fire each evening, the blade now hanging unused above it. Sometimes she catches him staring into nothing, lips moving, counting names she cannot hear. And sometimes she counts them too, not out loud, not on paper, but in the quiet of her mind, in the weight of her breath. Because the truth is this: you do not need to swing the axe to be marked by its shadow. And in a crowded city, beneath banners and bells and blessing, no one is lonelier than the one who remembers the silence that comes after. The year is 1311, and the marshlands near Clonmacnoise in Central Ireland are waking. Mist floats above the bogs like breath from a sleeping giant. Willows bend low over dark pools, their roots gripping soft earth like fingers. And in the shallow reeds, a girl named Niamh steps barefoot into the water. She is a leech collector, though she would never call herself that. She says, simply, "I gather bloodworms for the apothecary. The monks in the abbey need them. So do the midwives, the old women with their bundles of herbs, the travelling surgeons with their flasks and knives. In this part of Ireland, if you bleed, someone likely meant you to. Leeches are used to cure fever, to balance humours, to treat the bad air that causes swelling or sadness. And Niamh knows where to find the best ones." She walks into the bog slowly, ankle vanishing into brown water, dress lifted to her knees. The surface is still, but below she feels the soft wriggling, a swarm of tiny mouths, already sensing warmth. She stands still. That is the trick. You must let them come to you. Let the creatures attach. Let them feed. It takes only minutes. First a prick, then another, like nettles, but wetter. She feels them latch on, one at her calf, another near her ankle, a third climbing higher. She does not flinch. Instead, she hums. An old tune passed from her mother. Something about the moon and barley and the sea. The water laps gently at her legs. Clouds drift overhead. The reeds whisper as they sway. When the blood begins to run, she lifts her skirt and steps back to the shore. Her legs are streaked with red. Tiny black leeches cling tight, their bellies swelling. She plucks them gently, thumb and nail, and drops each into a small clay jar filled with moss and river water. They wriggle, settle, wait. She'll bring them to the apothecary before noon, each one worth a few coins. Enough for bread, a wedge of cheese, maybe a bit of wool thread if she saves. Back home, her grandmother will wash the wounds with salt and bind them in dock leaf, of the fever that broke or the swelling that faded. But no one speaks of the girls in the marsh, the blood they lose, the stillness they must learn, the silence they must carry. Niamh knows all this, but she also knows the marsh, its seasons, its music, and the way it takes what it needs, softly, without apology. The apothecary is a crooked little building of wattle and whitewash, nestled beside the monastery walls. Inside, it smells of bitter herbs and boiled wool, of vinegar, honey, and smoke-dried roots. Bottles line the shelves, clear glass, dark clay, green and brown, each marked with a symbol, not words, because most who work here cannot read. But Niamh doesn't need letters to do her work. She arrives just after the monks begin their morning chants. Her basket is damp. Her legs are sore. The jar of leeches clicks softly in her hands as they swirl in the mossy water, fed with her blood. The apothecary, a man with crooked teeth and eyes like old coins, opens the door. He doesn't smile. He never does. Just says, "The hospital needs you," which means someone is ill. And the bloodletting must begin. Niam follows him down the stone corridor, past the stores of dried lavender and salt, into a low-ceilinged chamber where 6 beds lie in rows, each draped with linen stiff from washing. On the nearest cot, a farmer pale fevered, his legs wrapped in bandages soaked through with green. "Rot in the blood," the apothecary mutters. "Needs drawing," Niam nods. No questions. She reaches into her jar and draws out 2 of the fattest leeches. They squirm in her hand. She places one at the crook of the man's knee, the other near his thigh. They latch within seconds. The farmer groans, but does not wake. The blood runs. It always does. Some healers argue about the power of leeches. Some say they cure fever, cleanse poison, restore balance. Others call them old superstition. But here, in the wild middle of Ireland, they're trusted. The monks have kept ledgers, dozens of them, filled with drawings of leeches, notes on blood color, breath rate, wound stick. Niam cannot read them, but she has seen how the apothecary's hands shake when the jars are empty. How quickly his eyes brighten when she brings in more. "You're not just a girl," he said once. "You're a supplier of life, but it doesn't feel like life sometimes. It feels like cut skin and waiting, like blood on her fingers, like people who never look her in the eye. She is called only when needed, dismissed when down. No one asks her name. They just call out, 'The leech girl.' Get the leech girl, still. She returns to the bog each morning, steps into the water, lets the blood come. Because without her, the hospital grows silent. And sometimes, silence is worse than pain. The wounds don't always close cleanly. Sometimes they bleed for hours. A leech bite is small, but the jaws are clever. They leave a Y-shaped cut, deep enough to speak to the body. And when it speaks, it bleeds. Niam has learned how to bind them, tightly, with clean wool and boiled nettle. If you wrap too early, the blood festers. If you wait too long, it flows like a spring in thaw. The monks say blood is a river, too much, and the fields drown, too little, and nothing grows. So Niam becomes a kind of river keeper, not with words, not with sermons, but with careful hands. Sharp eyes and a jar of silent mouths. One evening, the abbey steward comes in haste, a nobleman's son. He says, fevered from the coast. Niam is brought to the guest house, stone walls, for blankets, glass windows to find for the likes of her. The boy is young, no more than 12. His skin glows red at the temples. His breathing rattles like wet cloth flapping in wind. A physician paces beside the bed, muttering about humours, spleens, and the position of stars. "Let her try," says the steward. "She knows how to draw the heat." Niam kneels beside the boy, her hands washed and trembling. She places the leech at the bend of his arm, another just above the ankle. They latch, begin to feed. The color of his face shifts slowly, from scarlet to something gentler, a clay pink. His breath steadies. The physician mutters again, but softer now. The steward crosses himself. Niam does not smile. She just watches, listens, waits for the blood to stop. The next morning, the nobleman himself sends for parcel, bread wrapped in linen, a handful of silver buttons, and a ribbon of blue silk. She stares at it for a long time, then tucks the ribbon into her braid, not to show off, but to remember. Even quiet hands can change the course of breath, but not every story ends cleanly. She remembers a woman in childbirth, red-faced, screaming, bleeding to fast. They called Niam to late. No leech could help that flood. No jar could hold it back. Afterwards, the midwife cursed the apothecary. The apothecary cursed the priest and Niam. She just went home and wept in the reeds, where no one could see, because for all her skill, for all her strange importance, she is still just a girl in a marsh, still learning when blood saves, and when it only reminds you you're alive. The seasons change. The marsh thickens in summer, then turns brittle in frost. The leeches grow slower in winter, hungrier in spring. And still, Niam returns each morning, ankles bare, breath soft, jar in hand. Sometimes she walks deeper than she should, to pools untouched by cattle, to where the water runs cold and the reeds whisper of things forgotten. Here, the best leeches thrive, fat and old. Clever as cats, they cling longer, drink deeper, leave marks that last weeks. Niam calls them by names, not out loud, but in her thoughts. She knows their colors, their slither, the way they twist when they smell skin. These are her companions, the only ones who know her work, her silence, her pain. One day, while wading, she steps too far. The mud gives beneath her heel. She falls forward, and out, into the bog. Cold water rushes up. Mouth, eyes, ears fill. For a moment, it feels like sinking into another world. She thrashes, kicks, finds her footing, pulls herself out, soaked and shaking. Blood runs down her leg where a leech has taken too much. But she doesn't cry. She sits on the bank, catches her breath, lets the sun dry her arms, and in that moment, quiet, breathless, she realizes something. Her life has always been between teeth and blood, not violence, not cruelty, but the gentle, constant truth of being a bridge between illness and healing, a girl the world ignores until it needs her, then forgets again, years from now. People will speak of monks, physicians, noble surgeons, but not of Niam, not of the barefoot girl in the marsh who fed creatures with her. Own blood so others might keep theirs, but still, a baby will draw first breath because of her. A fever will break. A mother will live through winter. Her prayer will be answered, quietly, all because of a jar, a reed. A girl in a bog before dawn, when she returns home that night. Her grandmother wraps her feet in warm cloth and hums a lullaby, the same tune Niam once hummed in the water. And for a moment, in the glow of the hearth, with her jar by the door and the night soft round them, she doesn't feel forgotten. She feels part of something older, something pulsing, something sacred, not famous, not thanked, but needed, and sometimes that's enough.